Welcome to Financial Clarity Live. I'm Josh Notes, your host, and here today with another Josh Farber, Division President of Growth Force. Josh, how are we doing today?
Wonderful. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. And would be remiss to not mention my business partner and man across the table from me, Phil Maffei, our CFO. Phil, I know you're always doing great. Great to be with you.
Always, Josh. Always great over here.
All right, so we got two Joshes in the room, so we're going to go with Farber and Notes, Phil, if you need to call one of us out for either
Yeah,
something we said that you like or more likely something you disagree with.
yeah. I'm used to this. I think I can get it right. Done this enough times.
There we go. So we talked a lot of not going to call it trash, but we talked a lot about how M&A doesn't work, how a lot of folks get it wrong, and we wanted to bring you on, Mr. Farber, because at least 12 months in, seems like Growth Force has done it right, and so we're interested in kind of this journey, right? When you guys figured out this was going to happen, what happened in diligence, 6 months prior, all the way through integration. So I guess I'm going to give you the first word on this. What do you think is the key, looking back into what you've just accomplished over the past, let's call it, 2 years or so? What was the key that your team did right?
Yeah, so many answers to that question. But what I'll say is, the first thing that we did is we made sure we were ready to make an acquisition and ready to take on a merger. We actually got the opportunity to take a look at Growth Force a year and a half or 2 years before we actually moved forward with the deal. And in that earlier stage, if we would have tried this, I do not think we would have been as successful. But being comfortable with what we knew and what we knew we didn't know put us in a good position to tackle a project like this. From there, we were not just looking for any acquisition or any merger, we were looking for the right one. So defining what that target was and finding that alignment of service, culture, and values in our target organization just set the stage for a really successful process, both through diligence and through post-close integration.
That's a great answer. And we started a couple minutes early, so we got a couple extra minutes to dig in. So I guess, can you give the audience that maybe hasn't met you yet a little bit of a background on what was the original name of the organization, what was your background, and had you ever done any M&A integration before?
Yeah. So, Josh Farber, I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee. I have really started my career in a technical CPA accounting role and spent the bulk of it in corporate controller and CFO roles. And through that time, as an operator in the finance department, I went through a couple of recaps and a couple of mergers and acquisitions, both on the sell side and the buy side. So I'd seen it from maybe a little more from the number two chair or behind the scenes to an extent, but never as someone who was leading the charge in the diligence process and really putting my name on the expected results. So um, prior to this integration, I was leading the outsourced accounting function for G&A Partners. G&A Partners is a well-known and respected PEO, HR payroll organization in all 50 states. And over a period of about 4.5 years, I had built out the team from 7 accountants to 30 accountants. So we had executed a really strong organic growth play. And we found ourselves looking for what that next transformation was going to be to help us scale from where we were to get to that next step and get past those hurdles that were keeping us from getting there.
Awesome. All right, so Phil, you might have the most M&A experience in the room at a little bigger and larger scale. And what we've seen in all the conversations we've had is, diligent asks, can we afford this? Integration kind of asks, can we operate this? And very few answer the second correctly. What have you seen, Phil, in your years of history, and maybe ones where it didn't work out? In what assumptions maybe were misplaced in the 6 months leading up, or even the 6 months following integration?
to pick up on what Farber was just saying in terms of how he put his how to put his name on the dotted line, right? And I think there's that continuity of accountability that oftentimes gets lost in the sauce here. And I think having that perspective and identifying the folks who are part of this process that have that level of accountability, I think that's important because there can certainly be a lot of lack of motivation, and people don't necessarily like change, right? So it can throw a lot of chaos into these sorts of things, and depending on how big and complex, it gets very complicated with the intangible things, right? Where we've done it in my past lives where PE firms come in, slash the top layer of management, and those people have people who are loyal to them, and they start looking for new jobs, and it becomes this dance of making sure you can keep the shops running, right, while you're trying to leverage all these efficiencies that these models and these diligence guys come in, and they come up with these great outcomes that are going to come on the other side of this thing. But it's kind of like a you know six socks, underpants question mark profit kind of thing from The Simpsons, right? It's like that little black box of like going from these two separate entities to some new thing that needs to be defined, and the culture that needs to be built around that. There's a lot of things that can get lost in the mix if there's not that continuity and plan through the whole thing from beginning to end.
Yeah, I'm going to try to insert some human function here, right? For anybody who's never seen an M&A deal, but for one reason or another is watching the show. I almost look at it like if two families were trying to plan two divorces, two marriages, and a funeral all for one day in the future and not tell the kids, right? And then just have everybody show up and get the relatives to get along and make sure, all the bank accounts and names are switched. It kind of feels like that from the ones that we've watched. Josh, obviously you guys didn't have a funeral, so this is going well. What do you think was done right around communication, and what do you think, maybe even looking back, you could have done even better on communication?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is I'll answer that communication point, but I've got an addition. Is during that diligence, if you wait until the deal closes to start thinking about culture and thinking about the plan, you've missed the boat. So from our perspective, we did as much diligence on the human side to answer that question of can we operate this successfully before we close the deal, just as much as we did on the finance and the legal side. So making sure we diligence the human side as much as we do finance and legal was wildly important. And when it came to communication, the M&A deals I've been through in the past were very much don't tell the kids. I mean, it was me as the CFO and the CEO being the only people in the know until we got the stuff signed. And it carries a huge weight. But also the motto was always, sell through the sale, because these things can fall apart at any point in time. And once you let that out of the bag, it's really hard to put it back in. Now, on this transaction with Growth Force, we had two executives that we planned to bring over and dovetail into our executive team and operate the combined organization. So it really was a merger. And I leaned on them to help influence the communication strategy to the legacy Growth Force employees that were joining us on the G&A team. And initially, I was a proponent of the don't tell the kids policy. And I was like, listen, we think this is going to close. We have a high degree of confidence. We all want it to, but be careful on your communication strategy. And they were insistent, actually, to loop in their leadership team and kind of their line level managers into what was going on once we crossed a couple of big milestones and were within sight of closing. And in hindsight, that was a really good idea, because what it did is it created, I don't think ally and adversary is the right words, but it created a champion that could be an extension of the executive team to give reassurance and give comfort to more of the rank and file that we were walking into a good situation. There is a plan. They've been briefed. They know what to expect. Not, hey, we're just as surprised as you are. I don't know what's going to happen, and create
Right.
more uncertainty and more chaos.
That's really good to hear how it landed. So let's, cut to kind of The 1 year test. This month is 1 year, right?
This July 1st, that'll be the anniversary. Yes, sir.
All right. So I don't want to count any chickens that haven't hatched, but roughly this is what you told me on our prep call. And still didn't anything change in the last 2 weeks?
Still true. Still, and this is something I'm really proud of. I mean, listen, have we lost a team member in the last 12 months? Yes. Have we lost clients? Yes. Was it because of integration related items? Absolutely not. So being able to say this confidently gives me a ton of pride that, we handled this the right way. And, the benefit was, or maybe some of the predictors of this success was on that targeting. We really found a partner that checked all the boxes in terms of being in alignment. It was very similar ideal client profile, very similar service motion and scope of work and engagement style, very similar composition of the team and the technical expertise. So it made it pretty easy. There was also a lot of parity in terms of the size of the organization. So you see here, you've got up on your screen, we had 4 legacy controller-led teams on the G&A side, and we had 4 legacy controller-led teams on the growth force side. So right there, it was a merger. It was not an acquisition. And I think being able to define what this transaction is up front and not sugarcoating it, not BSing around it, but being honest with everyone what the transaction is, helps create that trustworthiness as a good starting point.
Yeah, and Phil, when you've seen these where maybe it was a little bit more heavy-handed on one side, and let's say maybe think back into your Rolodex of successful ones where one group was clearly larger, but still treated the other in somewhat of an equal fashion. How did they go about that? What was the difference maker?
Yeah, it's funny that I was just about to pick up on what Farber was saying, and it's not often the case where it's very even like this. That it is very much one fish eating another, and the bones get picked from the smaller fish, right? So I think it makes it all that much more important to have those, identify who the people you want to keep around are going to be, make them your internal champions, have them advising you on the level of the talent and the operations and who's critical to keep around and make sure you keep happy. So, without that level of communication and openness and like Farber was saying, the communication, once you get to a certain point and you're ready to open Pandora's box, being direct and, as straightforward as possible is always advantageous. I remember when we were early in my career, a vice president sat the whole finance team down in a conference room and reminded us all that we made a career choice to be G&A expense, right? And I think there's some truth to that in the reality of when these things happen, and that's the first place where the synergies come from, the finance functions and the accounting and the HR, where you don't need 2 of everything anymore, right? So I think that the more you can communicate and figure out who the people you need to keep around and keep happy are, that's key to success for sure.
So, we're calling it a mashup for anybody from the 90s who remembers when songs started getting mixed. One didn't dominate the other. You had to bring them both out in order to have a jam that was worth listening to. Phil, I guess if you've seen one where it wasn't this, it was really so heavy handed, is there a way to do that right? Or it's just kind of, if you're the smaller fish, you either become one of those bones that gets picked and put in place, or else you get kind of, removed with some severance? Or is there a way that you can say to our audience out there that maybe is a bigger fish, or maybe they're feeling like they're going to get acquired as a smaller fish, here's how to think about it or go about it?
Yeah, it's inevitably it's a zero win situation at the end of the day, right? In the sense of the scenarios that I've been a part of where it's inevitability, right? It's not, there's nothing nice and kind about it, and it's a short term planned pain for ultimate, you'd hope a longer term gain, right? So I think that being realistic about the nature of the situation is inevitably the most important thing, and kind of just speaks back to that, direct, clear communication, and making sure that everybody understands where they stand, and the ones who are going to be the ones who aren't around anymore, being able to do that in a way that, like you said, severance packages, whatever it may be, in a way that's that's above board and is, you know, as honest as you can do it in a situation that ultimately isn't, you know, comfortable for anybody, right? Not that you ever want to see that happen, but that certainly is the goal at least most of the time from what I've seen, where that is inevitably a part of the process.
And
Yeah.
Josh,
I mean,
go ahead.
listen, that was, go ahead, Notes.
No, you take it. I wanted to hear about, okay, you happen to be one of these rare situations where it was kind of a 50-50 and you were the leader on one side. What'd you do?
Yeah. And, our path was not all roses and not all without casualty. I mean, listen, people are smart. They're not dumb. They understand why transactions like this exist. And even in our transaction, there were a small handful of people who did not make the move from legacy growth force into growth force 2.0, mainly positions that already existed within G&A. Call it the back office, the G&A cost centers, Phil. And that was, we communicated that very clearly. We treated those impacted with a ton of respect across all areas, and we didn't BS around it. And we acknowledged kind of the pain and discomfort that caused, especially to the people that had worked with them. So for me, it was important to figure out a way to get as fast as we can to growth force 2.0, to get as fast as we can away from talking about legacy this and legacy that. And some of the ways we did that is we spoke to the loss of identity in the sense of leaving what was. We also found ways to create something new together. So in this case, we kept the name. I mean, that was a huge number one. It was a big piece of value that we attributed to the transaction was the brand and the brand recognition that Growth Force had created over a 20-year period. But it also gave some sense of comfort and stability to the new employees who were coming over to the G&A team. Kept the name, kept the logo, but we changed the colors. We wanted to subtly tweak and make sure it was not just rinse and repeat, so that we didn't have kind of the reverse happen where the legacy people that I had been leading for 5 years now all of a sudden felt like second tier when this potentially larger organization comes in through acquisition. So it was almost a reverse consideration as the normal M&A process might go. But the way that we created this trust, people's minds are our minds. They go to dark places when we don't know what to expect. We always expect the worst. We paint the worst picture and we imagine that if we don't know, we must be out of the know and we're just waiting for some kind of shoe to drop. So we communicated early, we communicated clearly, and we communicated often. Matter of fact, on day one, we being me and my, our executive team at G&A and the rest of my executive team at the outsourced accounting division, flew down, met everyone in person to announce this transaction. And on that day, we walked through the Growth Force 2.0 launch plan. It was a 4-phase plan. The first phase really started at pre-close. So we told them, hey, this is everything we've done to ensure that the next 3 phases will be successful. And it talked about the next 3 phases with key milestones and deliverables to get out of phase 1 into phase 2 and ultimately into and through phase 3. And we had that plan laid out at the HR and people level, at the clients and client service level, systems and technology level, and at the sales and marketing and go-to-market level, so that we could really show across the entire enterprise what change to expect and make sure we're all aligned on what that promised land looks like, so that we can, again, get as fast as we can to Growth Force 2.0 new, not legacy and legacy.
And if you can, without maybe mentioning, names and facts, like, okay, sounds like you guys were as prepared as you possibly could be for that first day. Was there still some uneasiness in the air at the water cooler right afterwards, or is there anything that bubbled back up in the week or couple weeks following that you guys realized, hey, we could have messaged that even better, or we could have got out ahead of that item?
I mean, I'm sure. Uh, there were some system things that maybe we had assumed that were going to be easy that were not as easy. There
Sure.
were some team things that we didn't have full clarity on that we probably could have expressed more clarity on that it took 3 or 4 months to develop, right? So things that I wish we could have done different, maybe a handful, but not much. I think what helped in this case was after the announcement, we went to happy hour and I bought drinks for everybody. So it kind of helped pave the way to a little bit of fun and lightheartedness. Um, but being able to be comfortable in that uncomfortable was helpful. Or we don't pretend like everybody's going to be all smiles, and we don't pretend like you as the new employee into my organization, you didn't make this choice, and I'm not going to pretend like you did. So we're going to pull you along the way, and we're going to illustrate what that path is and where we think your potential is. But if you don't want to get on board, you can get off, right? Like it's no one's forcing you, but we're also acknowledging that you didn't make this choice. So it's a really fine line to balance.
It's an interesting way to frame it up. Phil, sounds like Josh and the team literally same day killed the legacy talk, started driving things forward, got the pints clinking, which is, sometimes that human factor is way more valuable than folks consider. But where did you see, Phil, in your years past, where the legacy talk creeped back in once you start looking at the numbers and you start hitting month one quotas, and oh hey, this side didn't deliver what they were supposed to, and that side, and you start to play the ping pong us versus them game?
I mean, we saw that all the time, and especially in the bigger ones that we had done, where these became add-on divisions of the business. So inherently, it was its own bolt-on component of things, and it's easy for the guy to sit in front of the room and say it's all of us going forward, but it's certainly for a period of time, right? There is certainly that bifurcation, right? And when things like earnouts are involved, and all the metrics are kept separate for those reasons, it's inevitably a part of the plan that things are bifurcated for some period of time, right? So it's whether it's nice to get up in front of everybody and say, hey, this is all one big happy family going forward. I'm with Josh, but all of the sitting around having a couple beers is the best way to air out the frustrations and get everybody on the same page, right? I think that's probably the most important thing. But it really boils down to getting back to the day to day and kind of walking the talk eventually brings it all together, right? And I think that's really at the end of whoever is around is going to be around, and then some time goes by, and if you're adamant about really making some changes and living by that, that's really where ultimately whether an earn out's a year and it's in the second year, or it's certainly not fast, and the bigger the slower, but it's a part of the game, right? And that's why the integration period is so important on the other side of things, from whether or not there was any value in getting together and making one big happy family, making it work, Brady Bunch style.
So Farber, give us okay, we're past the beers clinking, we're in a couple of months, the operations is going, but we're going to get to tech, but talk about how you got the teams, to keep working together, to keep learning each other's different styles. How did you get the culture to mash before we get to tech?
Yeah. So the first thing we did is we said, you know what? First 30 days, you newly acquired folks are going to have enough to deal with figuring out the tech, getting your benefits enrolled, figuring out how to access your new paychecks, getting integrated just in how a new organization works from the back office side. So we really minimize the disruption in that first 30 days to give folks time to get set up and settled in. And then once that 30 days was over, we started executing. So to Phil's point, the proof is in the pudding. So we went through and did an analysis and a balance of what is most critical to change and what is maybe not easiest to change, but achievable to change. And we started knocking them off. So in the first 6 months, we did talk a lot, us and them. It was legacy growth force folks, you have benefits open enrollment here, you have security training here, you have XYZ here, legacy G&A folks, you have this, and this. And that didn't really stop until month 9, 8 or 9. But it was a sprint to make it happen that fast. And to get it done, we did implement some, I'll call it cultural norms or expectations on a day-to-day basis to make sure we were all reading from the same playbook and how our behaviors are expressed at work. Some of those for us is for all teams. The legacy G&A teams had already been doing this. The growth force teams started doing this. It was an 8:45 a.m. Central Time morning huddle every single day. So we got everybody on the same meeting cadence and rhythm. And then on Wednesday mornings, we started doing an all hands. Matter of fact, we still continue to do this every Wednesday. We do a quick, less than 10 minutes, all hands meeting to share updates. Hey, you should know this. Hey, here's something cool that happened. Hey, beware of this. And create that 60 people on the same Microsoft Teams screen to start to create some collaboration and make sure that messaging is coming straight to the ears of the people that are going to be impacted by it.
Okay, so we talked about tech. We've obviously, we'll share for this audience that we've worked together. Sustained CFO is definitely a smaller organization than either of the two that you put together, but we do have a lot of similar philosophies, and we happen to have a similar tech stack in using Monday.com. That is not the end all be all, but it definitely probably sounded like was part of the center of gravity that pulled things together. So I guess you could talk about Monday, you could talk about other systems that pulled things together. I guess what worked well, what didn't, and what still needs to change a year in.
Yeah, so the priority was also kind of financially driven, where when we merged together on day one, we had 2 different QuickBooks Online consoles and subscriptions, 2 different Bill.coms, 2 different Expensifys, 2 different ramps, 2 different Sage Intacct consoles that each had an annual subscription that was not an immaterial amount of money. So that's where we started. We started blending those tech stacks and centralizing the administration for all of our third-party vendors that we use to deliver services to our clients. At the same time, we went through the process documentation for legacy growth force and legacy G&A, and we literally debated which one's better, compared what we can pick, and did a best and brightest approach to create the go forward plan. And that helped also create some trustworthiness and some continuity where, not everyone in an M&A situation has that luxury, but when we could keep some of that legacy and really redefine it for a brand new 2.0, where literally everyone in our organization experienced some kind of change, it gave folks a place to build some camaraderie and have some empathy back and forth. Now, on day one, before we even closed this transaction, we knew that the way that we were using Monday.com as a legacy G&A business was not going to scale. It was not going to scale through this acquisition, nor would it scale through our own organic growth aspirations. So within 90 days, we had engaged a partner, crafted and explored and built a solution to shift from Monday.com professional platform to Monday.com enterprise platform. And in October, we kicked off a 6-month project. I think it turned into 6 months. We hit it as scheduled to transform everything that we had done over a period of 3.5 years leading up to summer of 2025. Take all of those painful lessons learned and build on all the positive and productive lessons learned and create something brand new that ultimately culminated in April 1st. We launched Monday.com 2.0 to everyone in the organization. And again, there were aspects of this that were brand new to the users that had been in Monday for 3 years. And there were obviously aspects to folks that were using it for the first time. So it was able to push that hard reset button and say, okay, now is the new way that we're going to do this thing. You legacy G&A are going to be impacted with some change, and you legacy growth force are obviously, but we're all in it together, and we're going to do this at the same time, the same way.
So we've talked, now going on about 30 minutes about a lot of work that effectively made zero extra dollars for the organization, because this is just about getting the organization to work together. And I think that's what is missed a lot of times in these M&A transactions is, the eye on the prize and the earnouts and the cash out. But the reality is there's a heck of a lot of work that is created just to get the two trains to run on the same track. But okay, now we got to get back to making money. So question is, how has the customer been, experience changed for the better? Maybe even, some honest reflection on maybe what's not as good as what you recognized from before, and how do you want to shape that going forward?
So as I mentioned early on in this call, we were struggling with how to scale from a roughly 100 client company to a 400 client company. We were struggling with how to 2x again before the acquisition. So was growth force. So it was, part of the value attributed to this was we definitely increased the profitability of growth force with synergizing some overhead costs, but it also gave us a platform that we could grow from faster. So one of the biggest things that personally was helpful to me was welcoming in the two executives from Legacy Growth Force into our team. And one of them, his name's James Can. He's down in Houston. He stepped into the role of VP of Client Accounting Services, and he is fantastic. He got to take his eyes off of sales and business development, off of technology and emerging technology, off of customer invoicing and back office accounting, and shift solely to supporting the controllers and supporting these service teams and supporting the clients. And he loved it. It was a huge lifestyle upgrade for him. And consequently, I got to take my eyes, for the most part, off of everything he is now laser focused on and dig in deeper on the sales and marketing side, the people side, the CX side, the strategy side. So with this combination, with this merger, it gave everyone on the executive team the chance to take off a couple of hats and make sure we had better balance and better alignment about who was doing what, and was that really situated to their natural strength and their highest potential. So again, did that result in increased EBITDA? Maybe not directly. Does that result in our ability to now scale fast without incurring additional overhead expenses or having to slow down because we can't keep up with it? Heck yeah. And that was a big part of why we did this.
Beautiful. Well, we've told the story. We've gotten to the finish line. We teased it in the beginning. What we didn't really necessarily explain was, what does Growth Force do? So can you give us your 30, 45-second elevator pitch for anybody out there who needs what you do?
Yeah, if you're still with us at 33 minutes and 30 seconds, we should talk one-on-one at this point. But Growth Force exists to be the accounting team, the weekly blocking and tackling. So when I was a controller in private equity backed organizations, I always needed a staff accountant, a senior accountant, and a controller to keep the wheels turning on a day-to-day basis. But at the same time, even in large sophisticated organizations, I found it hard to find one person that could fill multiple roles if I didn't have the budget for a full team. We solved that problem. So our teams, controller, senior accountant, staff accountant, collaborate and serve a group of clients. So it's a fractional solution where we do everything from bill pay and basic bookkeeping up to and through tight month-end closes. And what I say a lot is we are really, really good at looking backwards. It's not to say that our people aren't strategic, but that's not where we focus our efforts. We want to do that controllership function, get to good financial reporting. And the reason why we're friends is because we can hand it off to folks like you to really get strategic and forward and make decisions that can help business owners continue to grow and achieve their goals.
Great segue. Appreciate the kickback. So, Phil, can you explain to the audience why, now that they understand what Growth Force does, how that fits together with Sustained CFO?
Yeah, it's the foundation upon which any good strategic finance platform is built, right? You need to have basic blocking and tackling handled before you're ready to really execute and take advantage of bringing someone like us in to do some strategic finance work. So two hands that wash each other for sure. Not mutually exclusive by any means.
All right. Well, we, have enjoyed this session greatly, and we like to usually end on what to do Monday. Now, this is a bit of a stretch. This is not the what to do on Monday.com. This is like as if the person that's watching is going, well, hey, I want to take this on starting next week. Well, as you heard from Mr. Farber, they didn't start a week ahead. They started years ahead in evaluating what they would need to have in place by operating their and auditing their own operating system before they would think about merging that with somebody else's. And then they built a system around that, a process, a methodology, and they got everybody on board, and they named the right folks to do the right thing. So tremendous job. I mean, obviously you're not at the finish line really ever. It's about how you journey, not how you destination. But if you out there in the audience are looking and going, I don't even know which way is up after listening to this conversation, I've got some good news for you. We have our Get Financial Clarity Here mark up on the board. You can take a snapshot, and this will take you to about 3 minutes of work, 15 questions to the Sustained CFO diagnostic. It'll give you an idea of kind of where does your financial operations stand, somewhere between what Josh and his team at Growth Force do, maybe all the way up into what we do at Sustained CFO. At the end of the diagnostic, you'll get a link to come join me on a 30-minute Zoom call, no cost, where we meet you where you're at and help you figure out how to get to where you want to go. So with that being said, it's been great being together, and we thank you for joining us on Financial Clarity Live. If you like what you heard, join our newsletter, Finance in Focus, for weekly financial tips, updates, and Q&A from the episode. And then we look forward to seeing you next week, 3 p.m. Eastern, for our next episode where we're going to help you gain financial clarity live. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.